and the other is obviously Islam. And there's no other, there's no other that has been constantly in combative opposition to the West. And the whole narrative that I think will be very important if you want to understand how to address Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate is to understand that Europe as Christendom is important to understand its intolerance of Islam. Othering is a big term and idea in sociology, but it's a very interesting term. It's essentially defining yourself by not what you are, by somebody else, a mythical other. In terms of Islam, you've seen it. You've seen the wars. You've seen the civilizational threat that Islam has posed to Europe, and the intellectual threat and the economic threat. And therefore, it's always there is the bogeyman. And it's how I think subconsciously Europe has defined itself throughout those 13 centuries. And the modern age is not a blip. The modern age is exactly the same. And you have to understand that for understanding what we're going to be talking about later on when we talk about Islamophobia, identity politics. That you cannot decouple the West's othering of Islam as a civilizational rival and a religion that is a rival to its own ideological bearings. You cannot decouple them. And so Islam as the other is a constant. That is how Europe perceives Islam. How does it perceive itself? It perceives itself essentially as the land of Christ, the land of the church, the Holy Empire. And therefore, even that aspect of their own identity will be because it's not Muslim, because it'll be the othering of Islam. And so it's the grand narrative, and there's lots of work on this. You can look it up. The grand narrative of European identity is all about being, Europe as Christendom. And Perkins, he says that this idea of Europe as Christendom possesses a sufficient degree of continuity and coherence to be a powerful factor both in intellectual history and in the collective unconsciousness of contemporary Europeans, even those, I would say, that have no religious inclination, in fact, are vehemently anti-Christian, are atheistic and secular to the bone. They will still, at the point of looking at the East, will define themselves as a Christian civilization. Norway, Sweden, the Scandinavian countries at the very core of that. And the other is obviously Islam. And there's no other, there's no other that has been constantly in combative opposition to the West. And the whole narrative that I think will be very important if you want to understand how to address Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate is to understand that Europe as Christendom is important to understand its intolerance of Islam. And Berger, who wrote a fantastic book, A Brief History of Islam in Europe, he says, in the specific case of Islam, as opposed to every other civilization you can think of, in Europe, the notion of intolerance and othering are intrinsically related to religion. In other words, what is it that really annoys Europe as Christendom? It's the fact that you have religious rights, religious beliefs, you have conviction, and you want to have the ability to tell that conviction to other people. That's a civilizational rival, that's an ideological rival, that's a religious rival in the past. That's exactly why you're in a confrontation zone with the West.